Soulcaster.
Caleb never came upstairs during Jeopardy. It was like a rule in our house. That boy would stay glued to whatever he was building or coding down in the basement, wires, monitors, God knows what else. But when I glanced up and saw his feet on the stairs, I knew something was wrong. He wasn't just walking, he was running. When he reached the living room, his face was the color of bleached bone, sweat collecting under his eyes, mouth twitching like he wanted to scream but had swallowed the sound. "Grandma," he panted. "Pack a bag. We're leaving. Now." I blinked, still holding my knitting needles mid-loop. "You all right, sweetheart? Did you blow something up down there?" I tried to keep it light. He's 17, a little odd, brilliant but anxious. This wasn't the first time he got worked up over something technical. I smiled. "If you fried the router again, just tell me." He grabbed my wrist. Tight. "Grandma, please, no jokes, not this time." His voice cracked. "Just trust me. Don't call anyone, not Mum, not Uncle Jared, no one." And that's when my stomach dropped. Because he wasn't frantic like a teenager who got caught with something illegal or embarrassed. He was scared like someone who just saw a body hit the floor and knew he might be next. My Caleb, the same kid who would whisper facts about encryption algorithms at the breakfast table, was shaking like he'd touched a live wire. But it wasn't just fear. It was something else. Something colder. Protective. Ready. I stood. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere with no cameras, no signals. I'll explain later." I didn't ask more. I don't know why. Maybe because his hand never let go of mine. Maybe because in that moment, the world tilted, and I could tell we weren't just running from a mistake. We were running from someone. We moved like a silent heist. He watched every window as I packed in the dark, turning off lights behind me. I grabbed my emergency cash tin, which he insisted I double wrap in foil. 2 changes of clothes, a bottle of my blood pressure meds, and a worn family photo I couldn't leave behind. Meanwhile, Caleb was yanking cords from the landline, snapping the SIM card out of my phone like he was born doing it. "Don't bring anything that connects to Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. That includes your Kindle." "My Kindle?" "Especially your Kindle. They're listening through everything now." My mouth opened, then shut. He was dead serious. "If you've listened this far, by the way, don't forget to follow. Seriously. You wouldn't believe how many of you listen without subscribing. It helps more than you know and keeps us from screaming into the void." Anyway, we were out of the house within 21 minutes. That's when the calls started. My phone, well, what was left of it, was in a Ziploc bag on the floor. But Caleb's burner buzzed once. Blocked number. Then again. Then again. He didn't even look at it. Just said, "Don't answer. Ever. If they really wanted to talk, they'd have come to the door." I had too many questions. What was happening? Who was they? Why now? What did he see in that basement? But we were already on the road. It was past 10 p.m. and we were driving west. No radio, no GPS. Headlights off every time we passed another car. He had me taking back roads I hadn't used since the 80s, winding through farmland and construction detours like we were in some Cold War spy movie. Caleb sat beside me, backpack on his lap like it held the Holy Grail. I kept glancing at him. He didn't flinch, just stared out the window like he was waiting to see someone step into the headlights. "Are we in danger?" I finally asked. His eyes stayed forward. "We already were. You just didn't know it." There was something in the way he said it that made my spine itch. Because if I was in danger, that meant someone close to me, someone I loved, had made me vulnerable. That wasn't the voice of a kid with anxiety. That was the voice of someone who found out the roof over your head is wired to collapse if you touch the wrong switch. I tightened my grip on the wheel. He didn't speak for another hour, just tapped his fingers nervously on the window glass until finally, as we reached a stretch of empty highway, he whispered, "They weren't supposed to still be on. The cameras. Someone reactivated them." I felt my foot ease off the gas. "Cameras?" He finally turned to me, and in the red glow of the dashboard, his face looked older than it should have. They were hidden behind the insulation, not mine. I found them wired into the original fuse panel. Analog signal converted through coax. Whoever did it knew what they were doing, and they didn't want me to find them. I blinked hard. "How long have you known?" "Too long," he said. "But I didn't realize who installed them until tonight." I didn't ask who. I was afraid to know the answer. Instead, I just nodded, pressed my foot back to the gas pedal, and drove faster. We left the porch light on. That was the part that stuck in my head for the first few miles. Some stupid, quiet thought that someone driving by would see the warm glow and think we were still inside. Safe. Home. Like we'd just stepped out to grab milk. But I knew, deep in my bones, that if we ever went back, that porch light would be the last thing we saw before it all came crashing down. Caleb sat beside me in the Buick, with his jaw locked tight, clutching his backpack like it was a lifeline. He'd tucked it between his feet, like it was more important than a seatbelt. I kept peeking sideways at him, trying to catch a glimpse of the boy I knew, the kid who used to spend entire weekends building cardboard cities for his toy drones. But this version of Caleb, he was silent, rigid, like a soldier who knew the war had already started. "Do not use your phone," he said again. "Don't even turn it on." I opened my mouth to ask why, again, but the words felt like sandpaper in my throat. 21 minutes. That's how long it took between his frantic "pack a bag" and the first phone call. My daughter's name lit up on the cracked screen of the burner Caleb gave me. Erica. Mobile. Then again. And again. Then my son, Jared. Both of them, calling over and over like their fingers were on fire. I almost answered. Out of habit. Out of some primal instinct that said you talk to your kids when they call. But Caleb reached over, took the burner from my lap, and tossed it into the glove box. Not yet. Maybe not ever. What if they're worried? They should be. His voice was so calm, it scared me more than if he'd shouted. My hands clenched the steering wheel. The Buick groaned as I took a sharp turn onto a narrow side road Caleb pointed out. No signs, just darkness and tree branches clawing at the windows, the kind of road you take when you don't want to be found. "I need to know what's going on," I said finally. He glanced at me, eyes flicking toward the rearview mirror. "Do you remember that fuse panel in the basement? The one Grandpa kept locked?" "Of course," I said. "He always said the breakers were sensitive, didn't want anyone flipping them accidentally." Caleb gave a hollow little laugh. "They weren't breakers. Not all of them." I didn't ask what that meant. Not yet. Instead, I followed his directions, off the main roads, through dirt paths and winding hills, avoiding streetlights and gas stations with cameras. We stopped once, for gas and a single bottled water. Caleb paid in cash and left before the cashier could say a word. He didn't even glance at the security dome in the corner. I did. It felt like an eye that blinked. "Back in the car," he said. If you get a text from anyone, even family, ignore it. If you see a weird app appear on your phone, factory reset it and chuck the SIM. If you feel like we're being followed, say nothing. Just change direction. I looked at him like he'd grown 3 heads. Caleb, this is insane. He leaned his head back against the seat and closed his eyes. It is. I waited, watching the road. I thought I was paranoid, he said quietly. I thought maybe I was spiraling. But then I noticed the patterns, the timestamps. Someone was logging every time I turned the lights on in the basement, when I turned the dryer on, even when I flushed the toilet. My mouth went dry. I cross-checked the power dips on the circuit. The surveillance wasn't wireless. It was piggybacked through the copper lines. I didn't find it with my gear. I found it through the electrical bill. I couldn't breathe for a moment. You're telling me someone's been watching us? In our home? He didn't answer. He didn't have to. That's when the reality started to settle in. We weren't on some teenage flight of fancy. This wasn't about breaking curfew or hiding a bad grade. This was real. I gripped the wheel tighter. My house, my home, my husband's basement. Who the hell had I been sleeping next to all those years? We drove for hours. Every time I thought about pulling over, my phone buzzed again. Erica, Jared, blocked, again and again. They never left voicemails. They just called and hung up, sometimes 5 times in a row, sometimes from different numbers. Caleb never told me to turn it off. He just watched me, silently, to see if I would. I didn't. I couldn't. At one point, around 1:30 in the morning, I saw the headlights in the rearview mirror. A single car, black or maybe dark green, hard to tell in the shadows. It kept its distance. Too close to be random. Too far to be obvious. Caleb, I whispered. I see it, he said. He didn't tell me to speed up, didn't tell me to pull over, just watched. His fingers drummed against the dashboard like they were keeping time. I saw him make a note on a crumpled paper map he'd dug out of his backpack. A real map, not GPS. And then he looked at me, deadpan. Do you trust me? I swallowed hard. Yes. His face didn't move, but I swear his eyes softened. Just for a second. Then he pointed to the next turn. Take it. Now. I did. The other car didn't follow. We didn't speak again until sunrise. The motel was the kind of place where the vending machine looked like it had PTSD. Yellowed plastic, buzzing light seats, and a receptionist who didn't ask for ID once she saw my age and the bags under my eyes. We paid in cash. Room 7. No Wi-Fi password. No questions. Caleb walked in ahead of me, scanned the corners of the ceiling, then the power outlets, then the old CRT television bolted to a metal arm. He ran his fingers along the blinds like he was expecting a wire to snap. Try not to touch anything, he muttered. You planning to steam for fingerprints? He didn't laugh. I dropped onto the creaky bed, ankles aching, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in hours. The mattress smelled like burnt cigarettes and pine cleaner, but it was horizontal and it didn't have headlights trailing behind it, so I called it luxury. Caleb sat cross-legged on the carpet with his backpack and began pulling things out like a surgeon preparing for an operation. A portable battery, 2 burner phones, an analog frequency scanner, and a laptop that looked like it had survived a small explosion. The keyboard had no letters, just worn black keys and 2 strips of electrical tape over the webcam. I watched him for a moment before asking the question that had been seething inside me since we left. What exactly did you find in the basement? He didn't look up. just answered flatly, "Cameras." I blinked. "I know. You said that before." "No, Grandma." He finally raised his eyes. "Not mine." I felt something cold crawl up my spine. I found 3 micro cameras embedded behind the insulation, one behind the breaker panel, one above the furnace, and one, he hesitated, inside the light fixture near your laundry shelf. I sucked in a breath. "Inside the laundry light?" He nodded. "They weren't connected to any router, any modern signal. They were wired into the original panel. Analog signal, no RF. Hidden in plain sight. The kind of stuff you only use if you don't want digital footprints." "Who would—" I started, then stopped, because that question had too many answers. Who could have installed them? My husband, maybe. Someone in the family, a stranger, a neighbor. Why would they be there at all? I whispered. "Who put them there, Caleb?" But he said nothing, just went back to his laptop, eyes locked, hands moving fast. When I leaned over to look, he snapped it shut. "It's better if you don't know yet." The silence stretched long and thick. I stared at him for a while, really looked at him. His face was gaunt, not just from fear or exhaustion, but from something harder. Focus. Purpose. It hit me then that he wasn't just reacting. He'd planned this. Not the motel, maybe, not the escape route, but something. Some part of this had been running in the background of his life for months, and I'd never seen it. Because I'd been busy knitting and grocery shopping, thinking he was just a brilliant, awkward boy who didn't like crowds, not a kid who knew how to hack analog surveillance. Eventually, I gave up and went to bed. Or tried. I laid there in the dark, one hand under the pillow like it might find answers hidden there. I must have dozed off at some point, because the next thing I remember was a noise. A scratching. Not inside. At the door. I sat up slowly. Listened. It was faint but deliberate. Not a cat. Not wind. Someone, or something, dragging across the base of the motel door. I turned and saw Caleb already wide awake, eyes wide, holding his breath. He gestured for silence. We stayed like that for 10 minutes. No movement. No more sound. When he finally crept forward and cracked the curtain just a sliver, his body went rigid. "Fresh tire tracks," he whispered, "right outside our room. They left 20 seconds ago." He opened the door, crouched, and pointed to the base. 4 thin scratches. One of them curved, like a hook or tool had slipped. We didn't sleep again that night. Caleb sat on the floor, decrypting data off a black flash drive he swore he hadn't packed, but found tucked into the lining of his old hiking boots. I asked him where it came from. He didn't answer, but I saw his hand tremble as he typed. And for the first time since he'd told me to pack a bag, I realized we weren't just running, we were being hunted. The sun was barely up when we left the motel. Caleb insisted we change direction completely, southwest this time. We stopped at a gas station that looked abandoned, with faded Coke signs and a clerk who didn't look up from her crossword puzzle once. He paid in cash again. Always cash. And not once did he touch his real phone. I was too tired to argue, too wired to sleep. But the moment we hit the road again, I saw it. A white van. Not too close, not tailgating. Just there. 2 cars back, neutral enough to look like nothing if you weren't watching for it. But I was watching. Ever since the scratches on that motel door, my nerves had been lit like matchsticks. I checked the mirror again. It turned when we did. I changed lanes. It followed. "Caleb," I said low, "don't react. Just look behind us. He angled the side mirror and went very still. License plate? Obscured. Tinted windows? Yep. He nodded once, like he was confirming a fact he already suspected. Was it at the motel? I asked. No, it's new. Probably picked us up at the gas station. They're switching tactics. My throat tightened. They? He didn't answer. It stayed behind us for another hour. We stopped at a diner in a rural stretch of nowhere. Pancakes, eggs, people who looked like they hadn't left the county line in decades. I ordered coffee I didn't want just to keep us sitting still long enough to think. Caleb stayed low in the booth, sipping water, his eyes flicking constantly between the window and the reflections in the salt shaker. Then he muttered, "There." I followed his gaze. The white van had pulled into the lot across the street, right behind a battered pickup. Parked, engine running, not pointed toward the diner, pointed toward our car. I pushed the plate away. "Grab your bag." Caleb was already moving. We left everything. My purse, the receipt, the change from the register. I didn't care. I took his hand and we slipped out the side entrance near the bathrooms, crossed through an alley and doubled back behind the hardware store next door. There was a trail behind it, probably used by deer or teenagers looking to smoke where their dads wouldn't catch them. I drove us out of there fast and low, exiting through a back road that wasn't on the map. As we hit the next stretch of County Road, the silence between us was taut. Finally, I said, "You going to tell me who's in the van? Is it the police? FBI? Someone investigating Grandpa?" He gave me this look, half pity, half warning. "They're not government," he said softly. "It's worse." "How can it be worse?" "Because at least with government surveillance there are rules," he said. "Even if they break them, someone eventually finds out. These people don't operate on paper. They don't answer to anyone. They've been in the cracks of our lives for decades." "What people, Caleb?" He hesitated. "They worked with Grandpa, or above him. It's complicated. I think he tried to cut them off before he died. That's what the encryption was about. But something went wrong." He leaned forward, hands buried in his hoodie sleeves. "He made the house a trap." My fingers tightened around the wheel. "What?" "Every file I decrypted? Every one of those recordings, those medical reports, the adoption forms. He didn't just store them. He buried them. With triggers, fail-safes, like he knew someone might try to erase it all after he was gone. It's why the cameras turned back on. Someone else flipped the circuit. Someone who thought I was just the weird kid in the basement with no clue." I stared at the road ahead, a blur of trees and frost-laced fields. "You're saying this has been going on for how long?" "Years. Decades, probably." "And my own children?" Caleb didn't look at me. "They knew just enough to be dangerous." My heart pounded. I thought back. Jared pushing us to sell the house after the funeral. Erica insisting Caleb should see someone about his paranoia. Little comments that didn't make sense at the time. A few months ago, she offered to help him go through Grandpa's office while I was out. I thought she was being kind. I didn't know what I thought anymore. The van didn't reappear for the rest of the day, but it didn't matter, because now we knew. They weren't just watching, they were coming. We reached the farmhouse by nightfall, nothing but a skeletal gravel road and a rusted mailbox half swallowed by weeds. It was the kind of place that didn't show up on GPS, which was probably the point. No neighbors, no power lines, no cell signal, just 2 oak trees out front that looked like they'd outlasted God. Caleb didn't knock. He tapped a sequence on the side window, two soft, one hard, and then stepped back. Within seconds, a sliver of yellow light appeared in the cracked doorway. "Jesus, Caleb," the man grunted, his voice hoarse from cigarettes or life. "You brought company?" Caleb nodded once. "She's clean. We need 48 hours, Max. I have the drives." Mr. Halverson, greying beard, faded thermal shirt, one eye squinting like he expected every sentence to end in betrayal, opened the door a little wider. He stared at me. "You must be Helen." I froze. "Have we met?" "No, but your husband used to talk about you. Said you made a mean meatloaf. Said you had no idea what was going on under your own damn house." My stomach went cold. Inside, the air smelled like solder and burnt coffee. There were papers everywhere, stacked in milk crates, pinned to walls, spilling out of metal file drawers. Old computers were lined up like relics from another era, humming faintly, even though half their screens were cracked. This wasn't a house. It was a bunker for people who didn't believe in accidents. "He was my honours physics teacher," Caleb said as he unpacked his backpack, "and the only adult who didn't think I was nuts when I started putting it together." I looked around at the scattered equipment. "This is where you've been decoding everything?" "Some of it. The hard part had to be done in the house. Your house. That's where the original servers were, buried under the basement concrete. It was like layers of secrets, stacked on top of each other, like your husband didn't trust anyone, not even himself." Halverson poured himself something brown and strong from a thermos and didn't offer me any. "He was paranoid for good reason," he muttered. "What he was involved in, this whole damn web, it started back in the early 90s. Asset transfers, off-book surveillance, data laundering through medical research grants. Your home wasn't just a retirement nest, Helen. It was a vault. Someone used it. For decades." Caleb set his laptop on the dining room table and began typing. The screen flashed to life, lines of encrypted code, a spider web of folders with code names like Deep Moth, Alabaster Seed, Client Null. Then he clicked on a folder labeled Inheritance Override. "What you're about to see," he said quietly, "is why they were watching us, and why they won't stop." He opened the first document. It was a medical report, dated 2003. The name, Erica Marlowe. My daughter. I leaned closer. Blood work, genetic markers, psychological evaluations. Not just on her, but on me too. And Caleb. And Jared. Dozens of files, cross-referenced, indexed, with annotations in a language that didn't look like any medical shorthand I'd ever seen. I grabbed the edge of the table to stay upright. "What is this?" Caleb clicked again. A second document opened. Financial transfers. Huge ones. Hundreds of thousands routed from charities and shell companies into private accounts. Names I recognized, names I didn't. Some tied to my husband. One tied to Jared. Another tied to my OBGYN from 1977. "You were part of a case study," Halverson said flatly. "A long one. Your family line was monitored, tracked, not for health reasons, for viability, inheritance, psychological resilience under exposure. We don't know what the end goal was, but your house was the anchor point." "Anchor for what?" I snapped. He exchanged a look with Caleb. Caleb hesitated, then pulled up a scanned page, an old form, yellowed, barely legible. My name was on it. Next to the word guardian. Below it, in block letters, not biological mother, classified. I couldn't breathe. What the hell does that mean? I whispered. Caleb didn't answer right away. He just opened a final file, one I hadn't seen him touch until now. The screen filled with PDF scans, all blacked out lines and government letterheads, and adoption records. Mine, my daughter's, his. I sat down without meaning to. I remembered a doctor visit when Erica was 6 months old, how the nurse had looked confused and whispered something to the receptionist, how I was told it was a billing error, how my husband laughed it off and took me out to dinner. I remembered the time we almost moved and he said, "Not this year. We need to finish some paperwork first." I remembered nothing unusual after that, but suddenly everything felt like it had been a performance. Every birthday party, every home renovation, every little fight about money, all staged under a ceiling lined with wires. "You didn't just inherit his house," Caleb said softly. "You inherited his mess." And that's when I realized I didn't know who the hell my husband was, and worse, he might not have known me either. The house was never ours, not really. That thought kept repeating in my mind like static as I stared at the flickering monitor in Mr. Halverson's kitchen, the bitter taste of burnt coffee thick in the air. The farmhouse creaked with every gust of wind outside, but the real storm was inside my chest. Everything I'd believed about my husband, about our family, our history, was fracturing under Caleb's keystrokes. "You're sure about this?" I asked, though my voice came out hoarse. Empty. Caleb didn't look up. "I triple verified every checksum. These aren't deep fakes. They're real. Some of these files were written in your husband's own hand, and some were written by your daughter." The world narrowed. "Erica," I whispered, even though I knew the answer. "She found out a few months after the funeral," Caleb said, finally looking at me. "Maybe she always suspected, but it was a month after the reading of the will that things shifted. She started pushing harder about the house, said we needed to sell, said it made her uncomfortable, said I should help clear out the old junk in the basement." I remembered that. I remembered how gently she said it, almost like a gift, like she was trying to relieve me of something. "And you didn't?" "I told her I'd get to it," Caleb said, his mouth twitching into something sour. "But I didn't delete anything. I copied it all instead. Mirrored the drive. I knew by then something was off. Grandpa didn't just hoard documents, he categorized them. Blackmail dossiers, code names, invoices for consultations that weren't consultations at all. They were hush payments." He pulled up another file and turned the screen toward me. It was a spreadsheet, meticulously organized. Columns labeled name, date, leverage type, amount paid, compliance window. I saw 3 senators, 2 doctors, a bishop, and one column highlighted in yellow, Jared Marlowe, signed affidavit in sealed envelope, 0409-2020, family contingency file. My son. What does that mean? Caleb didn't soften the blow. "It means Jared knew. Your husband had something on him, enough to make him complicit. Jared signed a non-disclosure agreement tied to a payout clause in Grandpa's estate. And when he realized what Grandpa left behind, the drives, the server, me, he tried to neutralize the situation." "Neutralize?" I echoed. It felt like poison in my mouth. "That's what they called it." "Not in so many words," Caleb said. "But when someone hires a private contractor to retrieve and destroy sensitive legacy data, and then just happens to suggest his nephew do some basement cleaning." He let the sentence hang like a noose. I couldn't stop shaking. "Why would they come after you?" I asked. "You're just a kid." "That's exactly why. No one would believe me if I said something. No one would expect me to understand half of what I saw. But I do. And once I started decrypting, I found one file they definitely didn't want me to see. He double-clicked a folder named Capstone, and there it was. A scanned letter addressed to my husband. Handwritten. The signature at the bottom blurred out, but the intent was clear. If you ever release this, your children will not be spared. You are protected, for now, but heirs are expendable. And below it, a list. A list of names. Erica's, Jared's, Caleb's, and mine. The air left my lungs like I'd been punched. So they think I know, I whispered. Maybe, Caleb said. Or maybe they think you're just in the way. Either way, you've seen enough now that walking away isn't an option. I wanted to cry. I really did. But there was no room left for tears. Just this aching, hollow cold in the center of my chest. The kind you get when the betrayal doesn't come from enemies or strangers, but from your own flesh. My daughter, my son, my husband. Had I ever really known any of them? What do we do now? I asked, almost afraid to hear the answer. We finish what Grandpa started, Caleb said, sliding the laptop into a Faraday sleeve. We blow it all open. By doing what? Posting it online? He shook his head. No, they'd suppress it in under a minute. We need to get it to someone who can't be bought. And we have to make sure the backups are spread so wide they'd have to set the internet on fire to kill them all. He pulled a flash drive out of his coat and handed it to me. It was disguised to look like an old church key. There are 6 others like this, hidden, different states. They each hold part of the full archive. This one's for you. Guard it. I took it. Not like a grandmother accepting a trinket, like a soldier being handed a bullet. And then, as if summoned by memory, my phone buzzed in the bottom of my coat pocket. I hadn't turned it on. Caleb had smashed the SIM days ago. But this wasn't mine. It was the burner. The one I'd forgotten was in the glove box. I looked at the screen. Incoming call. Erica Caleb's face drained of color. Don't answer. But I already knew that, because I saw the message before the call even rang through. Please stop running. You're just making it harder. You're not the target, Mum. He is. I didn't say anything. I just crushed the phone under my heel, ground it into the floorboards. Then I turned to my grandson and said, We finish it. Together. I woke to the sound of voices, low, tense, slipping through the paper-thin walls of Halverson's farmhouse like smoke. Yes, I'm sure they're here. I didn't move at first. I just let the words trickle in. My body stayed frozen beneath the scratchy wool blanket, breath shallow, heart beginning its long climb up my throat. She doesn't know, the voice continued. She's confused. The boy's got her chasing shadows. You said non-violent, right? Just recovery? A pause, then the unmistakable weight of guilt in Halverson's voice. It's her grandson. She's grieving. Don't make her collateral. I sat up slowly. Betrayal is strange. You think it'll come like a slap, sudden, loud, explosive. But this was worse. This was slow and sick and sticky. This was familiar. A man who made me tea the night before, who told me he admired how I raised Caleb, who'd promised us safety. I pushed open the bedroom door an inch and saw him in the kitchen, phone to his ear, back turned, one hand pinching the bridge of his nose. I'm telling you, he hissed. Jared, listen to me. This isn't what you think. The kid's not trying to extort anyone. He's scared. He just doesn't know what he's playing with. My son's name, like acid on my tongue. I stepped back, floorboard creaking. Halverson turned. We locked eyes. His face fell, crumpling like wet paper. Helen? No, I said. That one word was all I had. Caleb appeared behind me, fully dressed, bag already zipped. He must have heard it all. He didn't ask questions, just grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the back door. We leave now, Halverson's voice cracked. I was trying to protect you, but I was already gone. We didn't use the road. Caleb led us out through the barn, past rusted tractor parts and hay that smelled like old rot. Then into the woods behind the property, dense, cold, silent. The trees swallowed the moonlight and turned every footstep into a threat. Where are we going? I whispered, ducking under a branch. There's a creek about half a mile east, he said. There's a path that cuts back toward the highway. We make it there. We disappear. Branches clawed at my coat, but I kept moving. I didn't care. I could still hear Halverson's voice in my ears, replaying like a fever. Just recovery. Recovery of what? Us. Or the drive. Then, flashlight beams, dozens, scattered through the woods behind us like fireflies with bad intentions. They're here, Caleb said. They're already here. We ran, not fast. We couldn't. The terrain was too rough, too dark, but quick enough that my legs began to shake. My lungs burned. But adrenaline is a hell of a drug, and the sound of people crashing through the trees behind you will teach your body tricks. It didn't know it had. I heard a voice. Jared's. Caleb, please, we just want to talk. Liar. I stopped for half a second and turned. He was 30 yards away, flashlight high, flanked by 2 men in windbreakers and tactical boots. Not cops. Private. Smiling like this was a family reunion. Mom, Jared shouted. It's me. We can fix this. Caleb didn't even hesitate. He yanked my arm and whispered, Move. Wait. They're not here to talk. They want the drive. And us. We cut left, stumbling down an embankment, splashing into the shallow creek. Mud sucked at my shoes. Caleb reached for a low branch and used it to hoist us back onto the path. They won't follow us this way, he said between gasps. They can't risk damaging the forest trail. Too much attention. You really think that'll stop them? No, he said, but it'll slow them down. We pushed deeper into the woods until the lights behind us faded. My legs screamed, my lungs were gravel, but I didn't stop until Caleb did. At the edge of a ditch, overgrown with thorns, completely invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. He reached down and pulled up a tarp. Beneath it, a dirt bike. What in God's name? I planted it 2 weeks ago, just in case. He looked at me, brow furrowed. I can only carry one. I stared at him. No, I said. There's a rest stop 3 miles west of here, he said. Get there, blend in. I'll circle back for you. Caleb, please, Grandma, trust me. I hesitated, then reached into my coat and pulled out the flash drive, the one he'd given me. If they get me, you take this, I said. You take it and you burn them all. He didn't smile, just nodded. He revved the bike, and in a matter of seconds was gone, swallowed by the trees, the sound fading into the night. I stood there alone, clutching a flash drive that held a future no one was ready to face. And behind me, in the woods, the flashlights began to spread again. We waited out the night in a grain silo. That's not hyperbole. An actual, rust-drenched, abandoned grain silo about half a mile from the trail. Caleb circled back for me at dawn, true to his word, face smeared with mud, one knuckle bloodied, breathless but alive. We didn't speak much, just nodded, just moved. By the time we reached the storage facility, the sky had turned that sour grey colour, like it wasn't sure if it wanted to rain or break open. The place was exactly what you'd expect from a town no one vacations in: rows of metal doors, dull padlocks, gravel lot cracked with weeds. No security cameras, no office clerk, just a key code box Caleb seemed intimately familiar with. Unit B12, he muttered, typing fast. I paid 6 months in advance under a burner ID. They'll never connect it. The gate groaned open. Inside the unit, a fake filing cabinet, grey, dusty, nothing special. But as soon as he pulled open the bottom drawer, the room felt colder, like we'd just disturbed something buried for a reason. Caleb reached in behind the drawer track and pulled out a block wrapped in fireproof polymer, about the size of a dictionary. He held it like a bomb. This is the original mirror, he said. Every dirty file, every transfer, every DNA record, every classified doc, every sealed confession. Unaltered. The other drives were just insurance. This is the real thing. I didn't have time to answer. Behind us, gravel crunch, 2 figures. My stomach sank before I even turned. Jared, and a man I didn't know, broad-shouldered, late 40s, eyes that didn't blink. Tactical stance, dressed civilian, but no doubt about what he was. Don't, I whispered, instinctively stepping in front of Caleb. Mum, Jared said, holding up his hands like a peace offering. Please, don't panic. We're not here to hurt anyone. Could have fooled me, Caleb said, his voice flat. I told them to stay back, Jared added, shooting a quick glance at his partner. I came to talk. Just talk. Since when do you bring muscle to a conversation? I asked coldly. I didn't know how far this would go. Jared looked at Caleb now. You're just a kid. You don't know what's on that drive. I know enough. No, you don't. Jared stepped forward, voice cracking. You think this is about blackmail? Some kind of legacy project your grandfather buried? It's not. There are things in there that could destabilize actual governments, kill people, start wars. And most of it isn't even true. That's the story they told you, Caleb snapped, to keep you on a leash. He was trying to protect us, Jared said, turning to me now, desperate. Dad didn't leave that stuff for you to expose. He left it buried for a reason. Don't you get it? You're not supposed to see it. I took a slow step forward. You knew, I said. You knew what he did. You signed off on it. The day after the funeral. Jared's face turned white. I was trying to protect the family, he said quietly. No, you were trying to preserve a lie. He took a breath. Mum, please. That drive, it's not just files. It's a target. If you take it out of here, if you make this public, they will come after all of us. They already did, Caleb said, stepping between us. And they came after me first. His voice wasn't shaky. It wasn't angry. It was steel. You were supposed to be my uncle, he said. And you sent people to break into our room. You let them scratch at the door like wolves. You let them hunt me. I didn't know they'd go that far, Jared said. But even he didn't sound convinced anymore. The silence stretched long. I felt something inside me fracture, like a thin seam cracking along the edges of my spine. Love and rage battling for control. You don't get to be afraid now, I told Jared. You had your chance to walk away. He stepped closer, hand out. Mum, I'm begging you. Please, just hand it over. We'll figure out a way. We can make a deal. Redact the worst of it. Keep everyone safe. You're not built for this. You're a grandmother. Let it go. I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. No, I said. I am a grandmother, and I've spent the last 71 years letting other people decide what I was built for. You don't get to do that anymore. Jared looked at me for a long time, then at Caleb, then nodded toward the man beside him. Take it. The man reached for his jacket. Caleb stepped forward, blocking him. You make a move, and the failsafe releases everything. I've got 5 nodes synced to open servers. You touch me, you kill the silence protocol. I dare you. The man hesitated. Jared's jaw clenched. Tell them, Caleb said. Tell them what happens if I hit that button. Jared didn't answer. Because he knew. I could see it in his eyes. So could Caleb. So we walked past them. No one stopped us. Not because they didn't want to, but because by then, it was too late. Jared followed us to the edge of the lot, hands raised like a hostage negotiator, still trying to convince me this was all just a big misunderstanding. The agent, or whatever he was, hung back, eyes scanning the tree line, jaw twitching like he had orders, but didn't like them. Mom, Jared said again. His voice was hoarse now, desperate. Please, don't do this. You think I wanted any of this? I was trying to protect you, to protect Caleb. I stopped at the trunk of the car. Caleb slid the mirrored drive into a lead-lined pouch and zipped it into the front pocket of the canvas bag. No more words, no more discussion, just clean, surgical motions. That boy had stopped trusting words days ago. Jared took a half step forward. You're not seeing the full picture. You think this is some righteous war. It's not. You think that journalist is going to save you? They'll bury it, or they'll die trying. I didn't answer him right away. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the folded paper Caleb had printed the night before, the one I hadn't looked at until now. I unfolded it, took 3 steps forward, and held it out in front of me. You want to talk about protecting family? I said, my voice flat as glass. Then explain this. I let it fall. It hit the ground between us, open and clear. The non-disclosure agreement. Jared's signature. Time-stamped. Dated exactly 32 days after my husband's funeral. A 6-figure wire receipt listed as consulting fees. And in the margin, scrawled in unfamiliar handwriting, confirm silence of grandson. Redundant clearance unlikely. Jared's face drained of colour so fast it looked like a mask melting. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I'd done both of those things behind closed doors, in motel rooms, in the front seat of a Buick rolling through ghost towns. I was past the threshold now. I was done. You knew, I said, quietly but sharp enough to draw blood. You knew what your father was doing, and you tried to erase his trail. You tried to silence a child, your nephew, my grandson. Jared didn't speak. He didn't have to. I watched his hands curl into fists, not out of rage, but out of shame, or maybe just panic that the control he thought he had was slipping away. Mom, don't. I turned back to Caleb. He was already holding the envelope, thick, pre-stamped, addressed in firm, neat handwriting. Elizabeth Maynard. I hadn't spoken to her in 15 years. Once upon a time, we'd been college roommates. She became an investigative journalist, the kind who filed lawsuits just to get to the truth. We had a falling out over something stupid. Parenting, politics, something small that grew into silence. But she was the only person I trusted to touch this. Caleb handed me the envelope. "You sure?" he asked. I nodded. Then we walked together into the tiny post office 2 towns over. The kind with one old man behind the desk and a collection of novelty stamps from 1996. No cameras, no computers, just paper and people. I paid in cash, no return address. The moment the man dropped it into the outgoing tray, I felt a shift. Not relief, not victory, something colder, like stepping through a one-way door and hearing it slam shut behind you. We didn't go back to the car right away. We sat on the bench outside, silent, watching the clouds roll in over a dead cornfield. "What now?" Caleb asked after a while. "Now we wait," I said, "and we get ready." "For what?" "For them to realize they lost." He nodded, eyes narrowed like he was already building a firewall in his head, already counting contingencies. We didn't have long. By the time we got back to the car, there was a message on the burner Caleb had stashed under the seat. A text. No number. "You crossed a line." Then another, 10 seconds later. "We don't clean up messes. We erase them." I showed it to Caleb. He read it once, then tucked the phone into the glove box and calmly smashed it with a tire iron. No panic, no rage, just protocol. He looked at me. "They're coming." "I know. And it's not just about us anymore." "No," I said. "It never was." Because it wasn't just about files. It wasn't just about secrets. It was about the people who thought they owned truth, who thought they could rewrite history by making the witnesses disappear, who thought a grandmother and a teenage boy were too small to matter. They were wrong. And when the story breaks, and it will break, they'll know just how wrong they were. The cicadas were louder than usual that night. I used to find the sound irritating, like static smeared across an otherwise perfect summer evening. But now it felt earned, like the world had exhaled. Or maybe I had. The porch light buzzed above us, casting just enough of a halo to light Caleb's face as he sat beside me, cross-legged in the old rocking chair that used to be his grandfather's. His laptop was shut for once. No code, no servers, no defense grids. Just him, breathing, living. And me, right next to him, feeling something I hadn't felt in weeks. Stillness. The last few weeks had been a maelstrom. After the report hit, 3 parts, full-color graphics, timelines, whistleblower statements, the entire town went sideways. Names I'd once seen on school plaques and hospital wings were now headlines linked to embezzlement, surveillance experiments, and grotesque medical abuse disguised as clinical trials. Families torn apart, legacies collapsed, quiet retirements evaporated under subpoenas and press briefings. Elizabeth didn't pull punches. She never had. They called it the Marlowe Files. I didn't ask for that title. Caleb hated it. But it stuck. We watched it all happen from a distance. Mr. Halverson's farmhouse went up in flames 2 days after we left. No official cause listed, but I didn't need to read the report. Some things just burned too clean to be accidents. Jared vanished. Erica, well, she was still trying to call. I glanced at the burner phone on the porch table, our last working one. It vibrated softly. A single message lit the screen. "Erica, you ruined everything." I didn't reply. I didn't even blink. I deleted it, then turned the phone off and tossed it into the metal bin beside my chair. Silence again. Caleb didn't say anything at first. He just reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and pulled out an envelope. Thick paper. No return address. Came this morning, he said. I didn't open it. I frowned, slid a finger under the flap, and pulled out the contents. One page. Letterhead at the top I didn't recognize, but Caleb clearly did. I watched his eyes light up even before I finished reading. It was an offer, an internship with a cyber ethics firm based out of Chicago. Full-time, paid, housing included. They wanted him on a team auditing digital surveillance protocols for public safety agencies. He hadn't even applied. They read your notes in the report, he said. The ones you added before we sent the drive. Your annotations about the ethical implications of long-term observation without consent. They said it wasn't just the tech that blew them away. It was the moral clarity, the human framing. I looked at him. He looked young, but also not. Like what he'd been through hadn't aged him exactly, but had reformed him, forged something inside him sharper, steadier. You should go, I said. He shook his head. Not yet. Why not? He looked at me then, really looked, and smiled. Not the tired half-smile he'd been faking for weeks, not the twitchy one from before, a real one. Because you started this, he said, and you saved us both. I didn't argue. I didn't downplay it. For once, I let the truth sit where it belonged. I leaned back in the rocker, letting it creak under my weight, eyes fixed on the horizon. Fireflies blinked along the tree line, and for a second, I thought of my husband, of the walls he built, of the lies he hoarded like treasure. He thought he was protecting us, but all he did was give our enemies a blueprint. It took his grandson to finally rewrite it, and it took me to let it burn. I'm proud of you, I said softly. Caleb didn't respond, just sat with me, listening, watching, alive. We didn't talk about what might come next, the names that hadn't yet been exposed, the threats that might still crawl out of the woodwork. We just sat on the porch, breathing, free. And somewhere deep in my chest, under all the wreckage and wire and ash, something bloomed. A quiet, feral kind of triumph. Not because we won, but because we were still standing.